We have a rainy morning today, so we decided to do a good rainy day project. We've been really busy outside the last week or two doing a lot of outside projects, so it's kind of a nice change of pace for us. Something we wanted to do since we've moved here is make a really nice big barn quilt. The front of our house is pretty basic. The part that faces the road is just the garage, and there's just one window on it, so we've wanted something to cover up part of the house for a long time. And we finally decided on some colors and we worked on some designs. What we got here is a 4x4 high-end plywood from Menards, and we drew up a few ideas, played around with some colors, and we have settled on this option here. We really liked the two tones, and because of the size of the board, we really wanted a border around it, like a nice crisp white border, because our house is black steel. And in order to do that, we played around with the measurements a little bit. Again, this is a 4-foot board, so if we do a 2 1/4 inch border, we have really even squares to do our grid. So the next step for us is to pencil out the design and the grid and figure out which parts make sense to paint today. We assume everything's going to need a few coats, so this will be a several-day project. We started here by measuring the board again, and we realized that in one direction the board was actually short, 1/8 of an inch. So we were able to keep the 2 1/4 inch border on the one side, and now for these other sides that is short a little bit, we have to change our border to 2 3/16 inches. Again, we're feeling like if we get this border in such a way, we'll be able to get our interior grid really simple and straightforward and make all of our lines really simple to draw and make sure everything's nice and centered. These quilting rulers you can just get at really any fabric shop. Wherever you can find fabric, they probably have something like this. It's really nice because you can see through it, and it makes quilting really easy because you can measure your fabric that you're cutting off, but it also works really well for projects like this, where you don't want to be measuring over and making little tallies, because I find when I do that, my tallies never really line up anyway. So this way you get a really nice straight edge, and with consistent measurement. Since we're making a barn quilt, it also makes sense to use a quilting tool. So now that our border is marked, we'll get our tape measure and just check these distances before we commit to that inside grid. We're looking for the inside square to be 43.5 by 43.5. Nearly spot on. A little bit more accurate, but the other one was close enough that with pencil lines, it's all going to work out really well. So the next step is with the quilt. We tested out a few different patterns. So as you can see, these squares are similar but a little bit different. So with this one, we needed a 4-square grid, and with this one, we're going to need a 3-square grid. So we will start by finding that grid pattern and then make our lines from there. can see it. So it's just 3 by 3 grid. The next step now is to make the star points, and at that point we can start figuring out what makes sense to paint first. We're hoping that we can get a few colors going at the same time if the tape allows us. So there are a lot of different quilt blocks that you can use for something like this, obviously. The Ohio Star, which is this, is one of the first quilt blocks that I made when I got back into quilting, and it's something that a pattern I have memorized, and just is something that I feel really drawn to, and it's simple enough to do for our first barn quilt. There are certainly like really extraordinary barn quilts out there, which could be fun to do in the future for sure. Now that our grid is drawn, I can use this longer straight edge. That is pretty good. Almost right in the middle. Just making sure that I'm drawing the points to the right spot. Again, that is like pretty much smack dab in the middle. So now all of our lines are marked. We will go grab all of our paint materials and go through the supplies that we purchased for this project, and then we'll start taping things off and get our first coats of paint on. Here are the supplies that we purchased for this project. We did get 4 paint trays so that each color can have its own tray. As we were playing around with designs last night, though, we did decide to add yellow and a light blue. So we will have to work around that a little bit. We're planning just to mix the white and the blue that we purchased to get that lighter shade. So we have a bright white. We went with an exterior high gloss paint. We have our blue, red, and green, and then we also picked up a polyurethane or a spar urethane in order to protect it from weather. We did go with not the cheapest paint option. We have certainly learned over the years when we have went with the budget route with paint, and you definitely get what you pay for. So we decided, because this is a project that will probably be on our home maybe forever, that we should go with higher end things such as paint and plywood. So, and then we went with rollers because I think we're gonna have the nicest application with this route versus a brush. Oh, and then also painter's tape. Again, we went with not the cheapest version, so hopefully we can get some really nice lines, but I imagine we'll have some touch up when it's all over. The next step in our mind is to tape. So we're gonna kind of take a look at our grid work here and determine what makes sense to paint today. We're thinking probably one of the inside squares and the border. That way we can do a few coats of more than one color today, and then tomorrow we can swap the tape and paint the opposites. To start with is this inside square and the border. So we are going to need our red and our white. We are imagining that everything will need a few coats. So hopefully by the end of today we have the red and the white complete. We also are going to pay attention to this outside edge and give that a coat of white so that the barn quilt looks really clean from all edges and sides. We have our paint ready, and of course we have two kiddos that really want to be helpers, and we told them that they have to be really, really careful. So we're going to see how this goes. So Vinny, my lesson is going to be that you should just go kind of right on the edge like that, okay? To see if when we tape the painted parts, if any paint leaks through, but at least for starters, this worked really well.
Frog tape.
Frog tape. We'll let this dry now until tomorrow before we do any more taping is the plan.
That looks really good.
It is still raining, and for the most part, all this paint seems really dry enough that we can put tape on it. Since we're taking the tape off pretty quickly anyway, we're gonna just go for it. Try to get one more color done today. I'm not surprised by this decision. I'd probably paint the whole thing if Zach wasn't making me be patient. So I think this will go well. We're gonna work. Our next is going to be the green. Of the green, which seem to have really good coverage, so we're going to take this tape off while it is still wet and cross our fingers for taking off this red. We did a double row of tape by the corners just to make using the roller a little smoother, prevent any paint from going over. looks like again we had really clean lines, which is great. I would say it looks really good. There's one tiny little spot where the tape maybe went too far over, but I'm not really too concerned about that. Nice. So tomorrow we'll do the blue. We'll try to get the blue and the yellow done. We might have to save the dark blue triangles for the third day. We are on day 2, the next morning. So we did go ahead and we got a little bit more done than we had originally planned for. It seemed like this paint was drying really well and well enough to put tape on it. We didn't have any issues with any of the first colors pulling up when we pulled up the paint. So this morning we're gonna finish the dark blue points, and then after that dries, we'll start the border color. I'll tape this off. Triangles are all dry now, so I'm going to start taping off these outside squares, and I just mixed up a lighter blue that we're going to use for those. The more we're thinking about it, we're thinking doing a consistent background with the light blue, but we're just going to kind of feel it out for now and make a decision after we see it. The last thing we're gonna do before putting on the clear coat is fill in any edge gaps with some wood filler and then go over it once more with the white paint. So we have just like a few seams here from the plywood. So I'm just gonna fill that in real quick and then we'll do our last coat of paint once that's dry. The paint has been drying for several days now, so we are going to move on to the clear coat. This is what we purchased. There are probably lots of other options. The thing I looked for was just that it was approved for exterior uses. You'll have to follow the directions on whatever you use. This one says to stir throughout the use, so I have it all stirred up and I'm just going to start applying and moving my way over. This particular clear coat says to do a minimum of 3 coats with about a 2-hour dry time in between. So I'm hoping to get